Now, even some Republicans are acknowledging that the Paul Ryan plan to destroy Medicare might actually cost them the House, which is pretty big, obviously. But they're still headed for that cliff at 100 miles per hour anyway. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says he's still firmly behind the Ryan budget plan.
There's going to be a deal on the debt ceiling, on Medicare reform. Would you concede it's got to look a lot different than the Ryan plan?
No, it's on the table. I'm personally very comfortable with the way Paul Ryan would structure it.
And Democrats are saying thank you very much. The New York Times reports today that Kathy Hochul's win in a conservative district in New York is giving Democrats across the country newfound hope for 2012 and spurring more viable Democrats to get into the congressional races in that election. And Republicans themselves are acknowledging that Ryan's plan could cost them the House majority. Congressman Phil Gingrey said, quote, to back away from this or to get skittish for fear of losing a few seats or even the majority would be pretty darn irresponsible. Look at that. He's already talking about losing the House. All which has to make you wonder, why are they so committed to a plan that Americans clearly do not want? Why not give it a rest? Well, here's one answer. Perhaps they're blinded by an ideological crusade that's been around forever. In 1961, then private citizen Ronald Reagan was fighting Medicare, even before it had become law.
We can write to our congressmen, to our senators. We do not want socialized medicine. If you don't, this program, I promise you, will pass just as surely as the sun will come up tomorrow.
Now, he didn't win that fight, and Republicans have never forgotten it. They keep going back to it over and over again. In the 90s, Newt Gingrich infamously hoped that Medicare would, quote, wither on the vine. And now with Paul Ryan's plan, they're at it again. Look, is it this ideology, or could the driving factor be something else? The money. How do their donors feel about this plan? Well, they love Ryan's plan. Let's talk about that now. Joining me now is Susan Crabtree, senior editor and reporter for Talking Points Memo, and Steve Kornacki from Salon.com. His new article is called When Toxicity is a Political Strategy, the political calculation that convinced Republicans to walk off a Medicare cliff. Now, Steve, you've written about it. Let's start with you. Do you think it's more the ideology or more the donors?
Well, I think ideology is a part of it. I think there is a big chunk of the Republican Party in Congress and a big chunk of the Republican Party when you just talk about, sort of the activists in the party who believe this is the right thing, who believe it's important to do this, and who are ideologically committed to it, like you outlined. But I think the key decision, the decision from a guy like John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, to actually put this plan forward, to push it to the floor of the House, and to make his members vote on it. I think when you talk about the leadership of the Republican Party and why they did this, I think then you're talking about politics. And you're talking about a balancing act that we really haven't seen in modern politics to the degree we're seeing it right now with Republicans, where Republicans who run Congress recognize, based on all of the carnage that took place in the Republican primaries last year, when just random Tea Party-backed candidates were winning because they were more pure than the establishment choices that they were confronted with, the Republican leadership in Congress recognized it needed to do something truly big, bold-seeming, and it was just going to attract a horrific response from Democrats and from the media to prove to their own base that they actually meant it, that they weren't compromisers, that they weren't sellouts, that they weren't the same guys who voted for TARP with all the Democrats a few years ago. And this is really the only way to prove it. So I really think the calculation here from the leadership was you do it early, you take the heat, you get credibility with your base, and you hope it goes away by November 2012.
But, Steve and Susan, there's a great irony there because, the Tea Party is supposed to give you, legit street cred in politics. But when you look at who funds the Tea Party, you got FreedomWorks, for example. They're now handing out all this instructional stuff on how to fight back and support the Ryan plan. But they got $12 million from the Koch brothers. I mean, this is a grassroots. This is the richest people in the country that are funding this campaign in a lot of ways. Isn't that right, Susan?
Well, I look at it, I've been covering Congress now for about 10, 15 years, and this is an ideology that members of the House leadership have advocated for a long time. They always have wanted to privatize health care. You look at Eric Cantor's plan for medical savings accounts. He was always trying to get the burden of paying for health care off of the employers and privatize these issues. And so now we see that coming into fruition. But right now there's a reality. They were in the minority before. Now they're controlling the majority. Do they have what it takes to stick with this Ryan plan till November of next year? That's what we're going to really see. whether they're committed to this or not, because 18 months is a very, very long time in politics, and anything can happen from now to then. We're seeing the public poll and a public outpouring of negative reaction to this Ryan plan. The public, like you said, does not want it. So I'm really going to be watching the tea leaves here and the machinations as whether they stick with this program or not.
So, guys, look, I'm not sure that this is an either-or thing, right? So, Steve, for example, they have this ideology, but the ideology might be based in the beginning on, well, how do we get rich people richer? How do we get the companies that sell this stuff to make money off of this instead of people just getting treated? And at the same time, today, it might be ideological, and it might be, hey, you know what? The guys back in the Tea Party with millions of dollars also get paid off of it. Could it be that combination, or am I being too cynical? What do you think?
Well, no one could ever be too cynical when you're trying to analyze the motives of politicians. But I think there's a longer-term story here to be told where, it's true when you go back to the very early days of the debate over Medicare, sort of the conservative movement in this country was against it, and it's pretty much been against it, all the way through. But there was a very important period, I think in the last 15 years, from the last time the Republicans really went after Medicare as a party. That's when Newt Gingrich did it in 1995. And they paid a dear price in the 1996 elections for that. And what emerged from that was a Republican establishment that embraced what George W. Bush called, you remember this term, compassionate conservatism. And the idea was we're going to run as Republicans, we're going to talk about conservative things, but we're not going to actually do a lot of the things conservatives want us to do. And that would include going after Medicare. And so Bush actually oversaw in a lot of ways an expansion of the government when he was president. He oversaw the prescription drug benefit, the addition of more benefits to Medicare. Right. And I think what the mood of the Republican Party base today is a reflection of that choice that the establishment made to sort of be big government conservatives. That's the bind that they're in right now.
Susan, one more quick question here, right? Mm-hmm. Is there any chance that these guys will win just through obstinance? Because that Freedom Works, they're handing out pieces of paper and telling how the Republicans should double down on this and saying, oh, no, our effort is to save Medicare, which turns things on its head. And they say, and you'll see this now across the country, because once the Tea Party, the Freedom Works gets behind it, they spend millions doing it. And they're telling congressmen to hold up blank pieces of paper and say, oh, this is the Democratic plan to save Medicare. So we're actually on the side of Medicare. Any chance that works?
Well, I think that in the primaries, that season, that part of the campaign season, it's much better for them to appeal to the Tea Party base and to the ultra-conservative side of their party. So right now, like I said, it'll be interesting what comes around next summer when the primaries are over and we see the general election. Of course, they have cover for this because this can never get through this White House. They have a Democrat in the White House. So he would veto any kind of Ryan plan, I would think. And so I just don't, they have the ability, they have the best of both worlds right now. They can run against the Democratic White House with this and appeal to their conservative base, but we'll see what happens next summer when
All right. That certainly is going to be the thing to watch for. Let's see how it plays with the voters. Everybody's on pins and needles on that, obviously. Susan Crabtree and Steve Kornacki, thank you both so much for joining us this evening.
Thanks so much.